Welcome to a brief insight into the coaching philosophy and football philosophy of the Melbourne Victory Football Academy. Recent statistics in Europe suggest that your child has more chance of being hit by a meteor than they do of playing in one of the top professional leagues in Europe. That's less than 0.012%. Fair enough, this statistic was taken from a comparative analysis of participation figures. However, even if you're one of the fortunate few that get through to a professional academy in the UK, only 2% will be actively forging a career in professional football by the age of 21. This gives you a real insight into how difficult it would be for a young Australian player to move to Europe, get signed by a European club, and actually forge a career as a professional footballer. There have been a couple of examples of players that were developed overseas in overseas academies like Harry Kewell and Tim Cahill. However, the majority of the professional players that come out of Australia were previously developed through the Australian player pathway and via the AIS model. Now, I've visited the AIS on a number of occasions, and it really did prepare players for life as a professional footballer in a real elite training environment. And the records speak for themselves. I mean, in 2006, 11 players in the Socceroos squad came through the AIS program. 2010, there was 12 players come through the AIS program. And in 2014, there were still 7 players that came through the AIS program. Now, in 2017, the elite pathway for male footballers in Australia was closed down, leaving a huge gap in the player pathway system. So the development of future professional footballers in Australia was passed on to us, the A-League clubs. Here at Melbourne Victory, we took on board this challenge, and we're really working hard to provide an environment to help young football enthusiasts fulfill their potential of becoming a professional footballer. Our main aim is to produce the most successful professional academy in the country, and in turn, hopefully this part of the world, producing future players not only for the A-League, also obviously the W League, the Socceroos and Matildas, and in turn through that pathway for European competition. So how are we going to do this? So first, we needed our own football playing philosophy. Now, we understand the A-League needs to improve. We have the best supporters in the country, so in turn, we're really working hard to provide them with the best playing spectacle. Winning at Melbourne Victory is quite simply not good enough. You need to win playing the Melbourne Victory brand of football. So this brand was really the key to the formulation of our playing philosophy, which is an attacking, entertaining brand of football. Everything that we do and we coach within the academy and the pre-academy is underpinned by this playing philosophy. So in order for us to bring this playing philosophy to life, we needed a game model. So initially our game model builds upon the 5 constants that exist in any team-related sport, which is, the center of it, the ball, opposition, teammates, the direction, and space. To make the game model more specific to football, we consider another 4 constants that are always present in football, which is the ball movement, player movement, teamwork, and positioning. Next, we add on to the game model the 2 main moments in football, attacking and defending. Of course, there is also the transition moments that happen in between. So when we have the ball and then we lose it, or when we haven't got the ball and then we win it. Now, our objective when we're attacking is always to score. We don't keep possession just for the sake of it. So when we're attacking, we're always looking to create space. And when we transition to attack, we're always looking to take that space that the opposition have left behind. We have 3 core attacking elements that we coach, which is 1, possession, our ability to retain the ball, progression, our ability to progress up the field with the ball, penetration, our ability to penetrate behind the opposition's defense. When we are defending, our focus is always to regain the ball as quickly as we can. We do this by encouraging pressure on the ball, and when in transition, man pressure. So there's always pressure on our opponent to win the ball back. So we have three core defending elements that we coach, which is one, pressure on the ball or the man. Two, isolation, our ability to guide the opposition into an area where we can win the ball back. Three, dispossession, our ability to win the ball back and regain possession. This game model that lays the fundamental foundations for our playing philosophy and brings our ability to play an attractive, entertaining brand of football to life. Now, first, we're going to look at the key principles that we believe allows us to do this. And the first one is independence. The first aspect of this is ball movement. You've got to have a good technical skill set to execute the actions that our football demands. Collectively, the team must understand how to move the ball to create opportunities to score and limit how the opponent moves the ball to regain possession of it. Players, the second is player movement. Now, most players play most of the game without the ball at their feet. So their ability to move and understand when and where to move in relation to the five constants that we talked about, to the ball, the opposition, teammates, space and direction, are really critical to helping us fulfill our philosophy. These collective abilities really determine how well the team are able to create time when they have the ball and reduce time for the opponent when we don't. So next is the interdependence, which is a cohesion in between players. So the primary focus on that is teamwork. So the level in which our players can really work together in order to win football matches. And this is the coordination between the communication, their execution of their actions, which really allows us to deliver a style of football which obtains winning results. Finally is a structure. And that's a coordination of players is only really possible when we've got organized structure and positioning. Now, this isn't necessarily the game formation, or though it can include this, but it's the position that players take in relation to the constants of the game. Now, next, we have to provide the correct academy environment. So what does that look like? Now, we endeavor to really provide a high performance culture which expects success. Our first aspect of this is that our academy is always people-centered. You know, we invest time and we invest money in our players, but we really have a people-centered approach into what we do. The players within our academy are people first and foremost before they are our players. So it's important our environment makes players feel valued and motivated to do their best, and it's important that the health and well-being is always at the center of what we do. So by its very nature, an academy is a project. Now, we cannot be expecting to churn out professional footballers within 12 months. Okay, it's something that we put a lot of time into, we put a lot of investment into it, and it requires a lot of patience. But we believe if we do things the right way, ultimately, this will transcend into results. Next, we have to be flexible and adaptable. Football changes very, very quickly. Our environment in Australia obviously changes very, very quickly. So as an academy, we've got to be flexible to overcome any obstacles that we may face. And if we've got a long-term approach of actually remaining people-centered, we can actually, as an organization, have the flexibility to overcome that. Continuous improvement. Both our players and our coaches always look to continuously improve. We don't have any coaches within our organization that doesn't have long-term ambitions, and we certainly don't have any players that don't have long-term ambitions. But to fulfill them long-term ambitions, we have to be making small and continuous improvement. We place that ownership of the improvement onto our staff and onto our players. Essentially, if the player isn't driving their own development, it's going to be difficult for that player to fulfill their potential, no matter how hard we push them and how hard their parents push them. So essentially, we're looking to create this world-class coaching methodology, and we look at three areas that we look to can develop the human being, and that is as a player, as a person, and as an athlete. Okay, with the person ultimately coming first. So how do we do this? Firstly, by increasing contact. Now, as we progress through the journey with Melbourne Victory Academy, from the pre-academy through the development phase to the transition phase or the performance phase, the gradual contact time from Melbourne Victory Academy to the individual increases. Within the pre-academy, we only have 1 contact hour per week. When we move into the development phase, we're looking at around about 8 contact hours a week. As we progress into transition phase, it's 12 contact hours per week. Now, deliberate practice. Now, this is extremely important. We understand that our players are sacrificing a lot of our time, and one of the most important aspects of what we deliver is not to waste any of our training time. Even though we may have these players in the development phase for 8 hours, 8 hours still is not a lot of time to be working with these as individuals. So it's important that we utilize this time to the best of our ability with no wasted time. As far as isolated training is concerned, we encourage that the players develop in an isolated way away from training, so things that they can do within their own time. Next is a balance of priorities. So we have to develop the player, the person, and the athlete, and much as possible this is done collectively and collaboratively and not in isolation. So it's our belief that we devote 50% of our available time to the specific demands that will develop the football player, 33% of our time on objectives that develop the person as an individual, and 17% of our time in the athlete development space. The last important component is we have to be flexible. Every single child here within our academy faces different obstacles to overcome. Some of them could be academic demands. We understand that some players are going through important parts of their life where school and academia is a very, very important part of their future development, and we certainly encourage this. So we work alongside our players to make sure that they are not feeling pressure from our side as an academy, and that we can actually assist that process. Obviously, this means that player may experience less contact time with us, but we're there to judge the benefits for the individual. Next is our training session structure. Now, within the pre-academy, we take a bit more of a fun and small-sided focus, and our structure is a whole approach to the academy. Which means that the first element is always gameplay. So as our players are arriving, they may be playing games in 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3, 4v4s to activate them into the learning process. With a small amount of time that we have with these players, the studies have found that by playing the game at the very, very start of the session, it actually puts players into the learning process a lot quicker. We then start to begin to develop the independency of the players with thinking games that we work on throughout the academy, and also a lot of other practices that develop independence, like our rondos, and to some element, some degree of isolated training within it. Finally, at the end of this session, we look at consolidating this into the conditioned gameplay. So we start with a game, we implement learning, and at the end of the session, we consolidate that learning and ensure that learning has transpired. So in the development phase, we move into a more of a uniform structure where the players focus on an equal proportion of elements of the practice. So firstly would be the preparation of the practice, which is handled by our S&C department. Second would be the introduction of the objective we're trying to get out of the session. And third would be the teaching of the objective, and finally, once again, the consolidation. Lastly, in our transition phase, the players are moving a lot closer to a professional environment. So we've got a lot more time, so usually 120 minutes per session. So there's a little bit more flexibility around the session structure. However, the 4 elements that we worked on in the development phase are still intact. So that's the introduction of the objective, the teaching of the objective, and the consolidation. Now, I've hoped we've gone somewhere to give you a little bit of a brief insight into the academy and the fundamentals behind our game model and our playing philosophy. They are questions that are asked a lot of us as coaches. It goes a lot deeper into our attacking and defending objectives. However, we may look at that on a further. Finally, I'm going to go through some of the frequently asked questions that I have been asked by a lot of parents throughout my career. First and foremost, the question we get asked at Melbourne Victory Academy is, how do we get a trial? Now, as you can imagine, we get applications to trial almost on a daily basis. Now, we are endeavouring to really form a close relationship with all the NPL and community clubs within Victoria. So our recommendations for our academy actually come through the TDs at the local clubs, first and foremost. Secondly, most players' entry point into the academy is actually through the pre-academy. Now, 75% of the intake into our under-13s group last season were from pre-academy players. So it's a really essential entry point for us. Not only do we get to see these players on a weekly basis, we also get to see how these players react to our brand of coaching and our coaching philosophy. Thirdly, we have a very, very broad scouting process. Our scouts attend between 20 to 30 junior games every weekend. So my advice to you would be, if you are good enough, we will see you and we will offer you a trial if that's appropriate, or get you into the pre-academy system. The next frequently asked question I get asked is, should I play my child up an age group? Now, this is something that I never really came across in the UK, but is extremely big in Australia, and I think it comes through the fact that the lack of challenge for the better players that happened in Australia probably 10 to 15 years ago. So players like your Mark Vidukas were playing up age groups, and they considered that to be the main reason they progressed to being professional footballers. Our opinion is that your child should only play up in an age group if they require the physical challenge. Players develop at vastly different rates. Now, my opinion is with the very technical players and the gifted player, there is no reason why these players cannot experience being confident and being the best player within their age group. Now, it's very, very important that your children are experiencing success. They're experiencing building confidence, and they're experiencing winning, and that mentality which grows a player, and I believe grows a human being that we can develop into a professional player. The last one is a classic. Should I take my son or daughter over to trial overseas? Now, the reality of football is, if you are not able to become a professional footballer within Australia, you have pretty much zero chance of making it in Europe. Bearing in mind that these top European clubs now have the money to pretty much pick up players from anywhere in the world. They have scouts everywhere in the world. It's extremely unlikely, unless you are an outlier, which means you're just too good for Australia, that they would take the risk in bringing a player over from Australia. And on top of that, I mean, with the legislation that's changed now, they can't actually do that before you're at 18 anyway. Now, for the experience, yes, you will have a fantastic experience trialing overseas. You will get to see what you're up against, so the level of ability of the players that are in the same age group as you overseas can be a real big eye-opener. But please see it as an experience rather than an opportunity. Finally, we'd like you to complete a project, and that is to design your own coaching session. Within this coaching session, can you focus on one, an area defensively that you need improvement in, and second, an area of your attacking game that you excel at. Put them both into a coaching session with a warm-up and a game, and get involved with your friends and see how they find it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this brief insight into our academy coaching, and I look forward to providing you with more information in the future.